So, this will be a video sequel to one with which I recorded yesterday about my shoes. Except on this very snowy Saturday morning, apparently the University of Michigan bus transportation is not operating yet because of the very snowy conditions that came upon us here in Ann Arbor, Michigan last night and early through this morning. And speaking of this morning, I woke up with the intent to take a shower, but I stay at the only shelter that accommodates single males within a 70-mile radius of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it is full of gang stalkers as homeless persons working with and on behalf of and coordinated by the Ann Arbor Police Department and the University of Michigan, various research departments, as well as University of Michigan Public Safety departments, to try to contain me. An experiment apparently gone wrong and out of control, and was upon making a breach of a contained control study of biohazard and radiation experimentation upon the homeless, in particular myself. And so that containment is being breached by the videos that I am making and desperately on a daily basis fighting thousands of University of Michigan students and homeless individuals of Ann Arbor, Michigan, as well as residents of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and anyone else that is brought in to work on the behalf of the University of Michigan and the city of Ann Arbor to keep me from posting the truth about the conditions here of individuals such as myself that have been harmed as a result of unethical radiation and biohazard experimentation upon humans, of which is unconsented to and unlawful. And so, in my attempt to take a shower, I was, in waking up, I was rendered confused and intimidated by, what's called a gang stalking theater, and that's in which, and that happens in a number of ways. But the kind that I experienced this morning was, at least 40 individuals constantly acting suspicious and apprehensive of an impending threat, while consistently remaining around me, and therefore not only posing as a cognitive distraction, but also a physical deterrent from making it to the shower room. But this is also a shower room in which I've experienced gassing, and I've taken videos and pictures of that gas coming through the floor drain apparatus. And then also the lights in the showers have been fixed with capacitors, and capacitors typically have a radioactive material inside of them to boost their energy capacity. If you don't know what a capacitor is, then I'm not going to take the time in this video to explain it to you. You should look it up. But basically, they help to boost or jolt a draw of energy when an electrical harness or device or electronic is having a difficult time drawing enough energy to function. And so this is a common practice not only at the Delana Shelter Center of Ann Arbor, Michigan, but also throughout various buildings and commons within those buildings on the University of Michigan Ann Arbor's campus. And so I guess the idea is they're safe enough to employ, given that I would hope or think that in general students are not exposed to reagents that render their bodies extra electronegative and or electroconductive. And so if they were, for example, to walk underneath such a lighting apparatus that was fixed up and rigged in this way, then they would not pull excessive amounts of power, electrical power, and UV lighting from these setup apparatuses in the walls, in the ceilings, I mean, of these buildings. And so then they would, essentially not be capable of initiating that type of electromagnetic energy draw effect. But for people such as myself, who are visitors on the University of Michigan campus, who have been rendered excessively electronegative, they're too electroconductive, after being doused with a gas, a radiation gas that also has an excessively strong electroconductive property, and that saturating my blood and then also rendering my organs as well as the dermis, exterior dermis, skin, which is an organ as well, my eyes, my hair, all of that electroconductive, then I only need to, or someone like me in my condition only needs to walk underneath these lighting apparatuses throughout University of Michigan campus, as well as various properties, especially government properties throughout Ann Arbor, Michigan. And then by having that condition, electroconductive condition, I pull the energy, electricity that is running as a current through certain lighting ceiling fixtures, and then initiating that pull, then the capacitor is activated to jolt an excessive amount of energy as electricity to make up for the amount of electricity energy that I am pulling with my condition from that ceiling electric light fixture apparatus. But it also gives with that jolt, or can be made to give with that jolt, a radiation dose. Since capacitors, like I said earlier in this video, are made up in part of radioactive material. And they can be rigged to give more of a radioactive jolt, especially being that this is happening on a university campus, where the materials and the facilities and the tools necessary to rig a capacitor much stronger than would normally be offered to the public, or even to professionals who work in the field of electricity would have access to. And so not only have I noticed this personally with my experience, but it's also been relayed to me non-verbally by various journeymen about the campus here at the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I feel confident in what was expressed to me, not non-verbally, but while they were actually engaged in the work of connecting capacitors. I actually saw these capacitors, and I saw the electrical wires, the positive and the negative connections up in the ceiling, that all of which was being addressed professionally before the installation of UV lighting, um, which is a common trend here in Ann Arbor to use, because when buildings are closed, um, they can produce a cycle of sterilization with the UV light that they're capable of producing upon the floor and upon um, uh, the chairs and any tangible surface or material um, that is not organically made up. So hospitals have them, so and so forth and so on. So they don't pose a threat when they're not being jolted with an excessive amount of electricity by a very strong, powerful capacitor that also has been rigged with an excessively strong and quantity amount of um, radiation material um, within its compositional makeup. Uh, okay, so that's some of the basic, but the primary reason why I'm making this video this morning is because not only was I not able to take a shower, and again, after being um, intimidated to not take one in the past, after experiencing some strange gassing effect, in which I wake up in the morning so drowsy I could barely walk. And then, even in the evening after dinner, when I'm able to retire to my sleeping room on the floor where there is a shower, the showers are often full for hours, so that I can't get to them. This is all come about to be the circumstances within the past 2 weeks, I would say. Um, uh, yeah, and so within the last 2 weeks, I've only been able to shower once. So, um, but anyway, the video I made yesterday about the socks. When I went to the shower today, and I realized that I was able to make it to a shower stall, but I realized I didn't have the soap. Um, and then I realized the socks that I had brought. I don't know if I dropped them or what, but all of a sudden I didn't have them. So I don't. I would I wake up these mornings so out of it, and it's very unusual. Um, so I don't know, but I retraced my steps. There weren't many steps between my sleeping room and the shower room, and I could not find those socks. Therefore, I was forced to go downstairs of the Delana Shelter Center and ask for another pair of socks. And so that's what I received. Um, but I received them from a lady who, just a few days ago, she often works at the reception desk. Her name is Dawn. She's blonde. She's been working there for some time now. She comes across very nice and very pleasant, and as I think most people outside of Ann Arbor encounter people from Ann Arbor as being intellectually sophisticated and nice and pleasant and earnest in their intent and just overall exceptionally humane and humanitarian kind of people. It's a fraud. It's a cult fraud. It's a lie. I grew up experiencing that, just like people outside of Ann Arbor does, which is one of the reasons why I came back 3 years ago. But the last 3 years that I've been here, I have received evil intent, malicious intent, harmful intent, lethal intent, all because it has been perceived that I'm intelligent enough to understand and apprehend the harm that I have sustained at the research interest of the University of Michigan Ann Arbor as a person receiving services at the only homeless shelter in the 70-mile radius, excuse me. Um, uh, and being of exceptional intelligence, I believe. Um, I mean, I don't just believe that independently. I've had tests and examiners confirm that to me. And then also being of exceptionally physical health. I've never had any physical health issue or compromise in my life up until recently, coming to Ann Arbor 3 years ago. And so thereby perhaps being considered a most ideal candidate, and therefore, or thereto a subject um, for experimentation that the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor, or any research institution for that matter in this country would be capable of procuring a license and permission to conduct without um, the permission or consenting acknowledgement of um, that kind of subject. Um, and unfortunately for them, I'm proven to be too intelligent to figure it all out and then to release um, information about my experience pertaining to it that is building an strong evidence to substantiate my apprehension, and so is a whole citywide effort um, to discredit to at least induce me to believe that my apprehension is being discredited. Um, but furthermore, I'm being treated with the most extreme um, dark psychology practice known to man. I've been isolated from the community consistently and extensively for 3 years. I've been gang stalked as part of that isolation, and all that what that encompasses. Um, Harassed by police, um, poison gas irradiated. Um, it took me 3 years to get to this point to feel confident in making these claims confidently. So I'm not just spouting this off the cuff with no substantial evidence um, uh, um, by which to demonstrate the cause and effect of my apprehension of harm and the nature of the harm that I've explained thus far. Um, so back to this morning. And back to these socks. So I got another pair of socks. Now, in the past, I've taken scanner shots of socks that I've received from the Delana Shelter Center, and they've come up. The scanner shots have come up showing or suggesting a strange or an excessive electromagnetic energy charging of them. I waited to give an explanation about that because maybe there are other things that could explain a scanner's reaction, producing a negative image of these socks, brand new, presumptively, and apparently through the empirical senses of my handling them directly. And so here I am. I've been forced to get another pair of socks that I'm concerned may be treated to some harmful effect to the human body for the purpose of continuing and sustaining unethical research. And yes, I did not against myself as a human being. And yes, I did not get these from the University of Michigan directly, but the University of Michigan research departments of various schools work with and through the Delana Shelter Center. They're there on a daily basis, and they're incorporated with every aspect of its functioning, from serving food to the homeless community, with the aid of another nonprofit organization called um, oh, I forget now. Well, it's another nonprofit agency. Yeah. Uh, I've posted some information on my Facebook about that agency, and I've also posted the information on my Facebook from a University of Michigan website that demonstrates and proves that students volunteer um, for this nonprofit agency outside of the Dawn Shelter Center um, to help serve the food at the Dawn Shelter Center um, to the public. Uh, and so, that's another way that the University of Michigan has a way of or a legitimate tangent by which they can conduct various research, experimentation, and projects on which would, I guess, be ideally um, a group of the public that would be rendered financially and socially uninfluential and disenfranchised of resources such as money to protect themselves lawfully. But they would also perhaps represent a group within a society um, that would not have a significant amount of education by which they could become aware of the research harm that they may be experiencing, not having a sufficient amount of background in the traditional sciences to understand the symptoms that they're experiencing and how they can correlate to scientific principles and be explained as well, perhaps by those principles. Um, and so it very much so looks like an ideal um, targeted group um, of individuals by which to exploit and take advantage of to produce findings and research that would be nearly impossible to do given the standards of safety practices and protocols that are necessary by law in the United States of America to following that governs research conduct and policy. Uh, and so you have a university here, a state institution that's struggling to compete against more competent, legitimate higher educational institutions for research, and they're resorting to very low, despicable, inhumane practices in order to produce results um, by which they can try to use to compete um, with more creative and innovative um, productivity of higher institutions that clearly have a more reputable practice and standard of conducting research against the public. And so that is my position about it. Um, Everyone is entitled to a defense, right? So back to these socks. Here I'm at the undergraduate library, University of Michigan, the Shapiro Library. I picked this floor at random. I'm on the highest floor of the undergraduate library. I don't normally um, come up this high. I picked this table at random. There's only one other student on the floor for some reason. Um, I have no reason to believe that this area was pre-treated in any way before I arrived at it, anticipating. Uh, uh, this video or this analysis of these socks. W. I've never received a pair of W socks from the Delina Shelter Center. So, gang stalkers, they love inundating a targeted person with an excessive amount of clues suggestive of what they're going through, or some answer of explanation of what they're going through. But it has been my experience after being sensitized to interpret their form of discursive communication that 99% of the time those misleading directions lead to no comprehensive proof, let alone explanation remotely tangible to the circumstances being experienced as a targeted individual, or more specifically, the harms that are sustained. Okay, I do have another app that perhaps can give a different dimension of proof or intelligence. There you go. So I'm going to take the phone away from the socks and see if that triggers a different. No, it's not. So I don't know if this means that. Well, no. Let's find out. Okay. So put these here. Exactly.